Hello, hello, good evening. It's Monica from Life is Art, and it's Wednesday. Let's create. Tonight we are going to be making a double squash card, and this card is actually known by a couple different names. Double corner squash, shaded gatefold card, a bunch of different things. So you can call it whatever you want. But it's an interesting, fun fold card, and I'm just moving my mat up ever so slowly, hoping that my camera will catch up to it. So we're going to be creating that today. We're going to be using the Cape Cod Scrapbooking Stamp and Thin Cuts, and good news, at least as of this afternoon, these were available in stock. Sorry, I'm way off the side here because I got my camera turned around the other way because I forgot to charge it. And so it's plugged in. So I'm not used to where the camera is sitting. So the Cape Cod Scrapbooking Stamp and Thin Cuts, and they were back in stock. They came back in yesterday, I think. So if they're still available, you can get a hold of those. And we're going to be using some of the Cape Cod papers. We've also got some mixing paper from the August catalog, some inks, yeah, lots of fun stuff. So we were doing, what inspired this, we were doing chat and craft all day today, because it's Wednesday, so we craft on Wednesday, and so somebody, Marilyn, was showing one of these cards that she had made, and everybody was like, ooh, we want to know how to make that. So I said, sure, I'll do it tonight. So we are going to be making this. So like I said, I'm going to call it a double squash card, but a lot of people call it a shaded gatefold card, and you'll see why as we get it put together. So we're going to start out with a piece of white daisy cardstock for our base, and this has been cut to 11 inches by 8 1/4. So 11 inches by 8 1/4, and I will list all the measurements when I post the photos after the video is done, and so you will be able to see them there, and so you don't have to furiously scribble to try and get all the measurements written down. I'm going to line it up on my Versamat because I need to do some scoring. The first score line is going to be at 2 3/4 of an inch in from the left side and along this 11-inch edge. So 2 3/4. Just like that. And then we're going to come 2 3/4 in from this side, which puts us at 8 1/4. But if you don't like doing the backtracking, you can just turn your paper around, score it 2 3/4 in. And then we're also going to score 2 3/4 down from the top. So all the same measurement. So I'm going to turn mine like this, and you might not be able to see it all on the screen because I zoomed in nice and close for catching details. So we're going to score 2 3/4 inch down from the top. So now we've kind of created a little box, all with 2 3/4 inch score lines. So we've got 2 3/4 in from the left, 2 3/4 in from the right, and 2 3/4 down from the top. Got a little piece of fuzz on there. And then we want to do a little bit of marking. And what we're going to do is we're going to line ourselves up on our Versamat. Oh, I better move up a little bit. And along this top edge, where we've got our score lines going, we want to mark it at 5 1/2, which is exactly in the middle of our card. So we're just going to make a little pencil mark there at 5 1/2. Hey, Mom, nice to see you're watching. That reminds me, if you're joining me live, just say hello or howdy so I know you're here. And if you're watching later on replay, you can just say replay. And that way I'll know you stopped by. So we're going to mark it here at 5 1/2. And then I want to turn, and I'm going to, let me raise it up here so you can see. So I've got my long score line going along here at 2 3/4. And I want to mark at 5 1/2 here as well, along this left-hand side. It was the left-hand side till I rotated it. So we're going to come down from this top left corner 5 1/2. Okay, And then let's do the same thing on the other side. It'll be a little tricky because I got to do math in my head here. We're going to come down 5.5 inches from this side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5, and just mark it there like that. Okay, so we've marked the center at the top at 5.5. We've come down on the left side and marked at 5.5 inches from the top. And we've come down on the right side, marking 5.5 inches from the top on the right side. And now what we need to do is we need to make some diagonal score lines. And these diagonal score lines are going to go from that top center mark down to these ones. But what we want to look for is to make sure that our score line is going to intersect where these other two score lines cross. This one here and this one here. So we want to make sure that our ruler lines up with our mark at the top, our mark at the side, and right through the center, the intersection of those score lines. And then we can go ahead and score that diagonal. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to have to shift my paper because I'm going to be working at a weird angle. You know what? I'm actually going to turn. Going to rock your world. I'm going to turn it. So here is my center mark. I'm going to line my ruler up with that. And I'm going to line up with my 5.5 inch mark on that side, the left side. And I'm going to make sure that my ruler is going right through that intersection between these other two score lines, just like we did on the other side. And then we're going to score that big long diagonal, just like that. So now we have a score line 2 3/4 inches down from the top, a score line 2 3/4 in from the left, 2 3/4 in from the right, and then 2 diagonal lines going from the top center down to this side and down to this side, and they intersect those other score lines. And I don't know if you can see any of those on the camera, but that's what's happening. And now we need to do some folding. So the first thing we need to do is we need to fold in our sides. We might as well start with that. So let's fold this in like so to the center. And before I give it a really good squash down, guess where it got the name, squash. I'm going to bring this side in as well. Because I don't use a scoreboard, I want to make sure that my two sides are coming in straight and lining up together, and everything is true and straight. And then I can go ahead and crease it down, making sure to hold the paper good and firm. Bring in my bone folder, give it a really good squash down, like so. And that's why sometimes it's called a shaded gatefold card, because we've got a gatefold happening right now. But what we need to do now is we need to fold down on this 2 3/4 inch down score line. And again, we want to make sure that things are lining up from side to side before we do our final press down. The better we line things up, the better it will fold and unfold later on. Hey Sue, nice to see you're watching. Ellie's here too. Hello, hello. So now we've got our 2 vertical score lines done and our single horizontal score line done. And we have all made these valley fold. So these 2 are valley folds because we've got it going down in the valley. The score line went down into the valley. And then this horizontal one is a valley fold because the score line went down into the valley. And now we need to fold our diagonals, but this time we're making mountain folds. So this score line needs to go up the mountain. So that means we're going to push from behind, and it's even easier if you just flip your page over and fold it to the back. Now you want to make sure that everything's staying nice and true. So line up the score lines here where they meet before you give it a nice little crease down there like that. And I'm not going to do a really hard crease. I want to bring in this other side too. So this diagonal, fold it in, creating that mountain fold, and make sure everything meets and lines up And then we can give everything, it looks like we're folding a paper airplane right now, doesn't it? It's like we're ready to fly away. We're going to fly away with our paper airplane. All right, now we turned it over. So if we turn it back to this side, we can see when we look at the end that we created a mountain fold because our crease went up into the mountain. Okay, and all of our other creases are valley folds. So if you take your finger, see how it did a little pop there? See how we've got our mountain folds sticking up? If we poke right where those intersect, then everything else will pop back up, just like that. And then if we push these two corners in and just fold them in, everything will fold up the way we want it to and lay flat. Squash. It's a squash fold card. We just squash it in. So again, we just take those two corners and just kind of lift them up and push them towards the center, and everything should fold down nice and neat. Easy peasy. Hey Carol, nice to see you joining in. And then we can always go ahead and give it an extra a little crease here and there to make sure everything is tucked in nicely. And with it, when this stands up, what happens is that gate folded part at the bottom sticks out a little bit. I'll kind of give you the view from this side. And the top, this is why it's called a shaded gatefold. These parts look like kind of like a little roof. It's kind of shading our gatefold. But it's also called a squash card because you're making squash folds. Just like that. So now all we need to do is decorate it. Wasn't that easy? So let's start bringing in some of our papers. The first thing I want to do is, why don't we decorate these tall front panels here at the front? And for this, I'm just going to lift this part up and fold it down. And I'm going to be decorating this long rectangle here that has our diagonal fold going through it. So I have cut 2 pieces of mix-in paper, these lovely polka dots on Toffee from the mix-in collection. And what I did was I cut the 2 pieces all at once and then cut them in half because it's a gatefold card. So quite often when you do gatefold, you make your patterns meet in the center, right? So these 2 pieces are 2.5 by 5 inches. Now we need to do a little bit of finagling with these. And what we need to do is we need to cut this diagonal. And it's going to be different for each side. This side's going to have a diagonal going this way, and this side's going to have a diagonal going this way. So we need to cut them individually. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our 2.5 by 5 inch piece, and we're going to mark it 2 5/8 inch up on wherever the inside side is. So on this one, we're going to come 2 5/8 up on the right hand side. So let me just line it up here. We're going to come up 1, 2.5, and 5/8 is in between 2.5 and 2 3/4. And we're just going to make a little mark, just like that. And then we're going to take our other one, and this one we need to mark on this side because our diagonal is going to come this way. So we're going to put it on here, and we're going to come up 1, 2.5, and then mark it halfway between the 1/2 and the 3/4, and that will be 2 5/8. And now we just need our little photo trimmer, and we're going to be cutting from the top edge down to this mark, so the top right point down to this mark, because this is the one for the right side. So just line it up on your trimmer like that. You can erase those pencil marks if you want now that you've done the trimming. There we go. So that's for our right side. And then this one, because it's for our left side, we're coming from the top left down to our mark. So let's line that up in our trimmer. Line up the mark, line up the top corner, a little trim, and there we go. Now we've got our 2 pieces, and we can adhere those to the front of our card. And I find it's easiest if you kind of open up your card and put it back to that original gatefold-like look. I'm going to use some liquid glue for this because liquid glue always works a little bit better on pointy, triangular-y pieces. And it's almost empty, so it takes a minute for it to decide to run all the way down to the bottom. There we go. And we're going to center this on this side. And you really kind of want to focus on your edges and your bottom, because this part is going to be kind of hidden, right? So if this bit here is a little bit off, it's okay. Just focus on your outside edges. And then we're going to take the top of our rectangle and we'll glue that up here. And we kind of want to line it up so it matches the down below part. And there we go. That's our left side done. Let's bring in the right side. The back side of this is a beautiful toffee plaid. Isn't that gorgeous? I went for the side that had more toffee on it because it's just going to work with my design. And, you know, sometimes that's how you choose things. Which one's more thematic? And then let's grab our little triangular top that we trimmed off. I like this because all the pieces that we're trimming off, we're still using on the card. Sometimes when you have to trim things funny, you don't get to use the pieces and you're like, oh, well, that's kind of a waste of paper. But this particular one, you get to use all the pieces. There we go. So there, and then we can put it back down like that. Now you can see we've got those lovely polka dots happening on the front. Hello, Deborah. Nice to see you're watching. And then let's also do some decorating up here at the top. We've got this big triangle that's formed up there. And so for that, I'm using a piece of the pattern paper that looks like the palm leaves. And this has been cut to 3 5/8 inch square. So halfway between 3 1/2 and 3/4 is 5/8. So 3 5/8 inch square, but we need a triangle. So we're going to take our little trimmer and we're going to trim it from corner to corner. Like so. Lovely. And then we can go ahead and add our triangle. On here, and we're going to center it in this triangular part. Hopefully center. It's hard. I can't actually see my score lines very well. There we go. When I bend them up, I can see them. Center it there like that. And then we're going to move to the inside. And on the inside, we have these triangles that are on the back. And we're going to use this same piece of paper because we don't want to waste any of it. So we're going to take this little guy here, and we're going to take the long diagonal that we cut off of our square. So this was our square. So the diagonal is going to go in our little trimmer against the top to make it nice and square. And then we're going to line the point up, and we're going to trim this into two littler triangles. And just like I said, we're not wasting any pieces. These little triangles are going to go on the inside of the card. Now, if you wanted to, you could flip over and have the opposite design, but because my opposite design is stripes, they're going to look really kind of awkward on the inside because they're not going to go, they're not going to match very well. They're not going to go the right direction. So I'm just going to continue the beautiful beachy palm fronds to the inside. There we go. We're going to have a decent number of patterns going on here anyway, so we don't really need a different pattern for every section. There we go. Our nice 2 little triangles added there on the inside. And then let's deal with these large panels. And for those, we're going to do the same treatment that we did for the outside, but I'm going to use a different pattern paper. And this is that beautiful one that says happiness comes in waves. And it's all kind of done in a wavy fashion. Again, I have taken and cut 2 that are 5 inches by 2.5, and I cut them as a 5-inch by 5-inch square and then trimmed it in half so that it's matchy-matchy, although that's not essential. And then we're going to do the same thing, marking the sides. I moved that out of the way too quick. So for this side, we're going to need a diagonal coming down like this. So we're going to mark along the side at, where did I write it down? 2 5/8. So let's line it up on our Versamat, and we're going to come up from the bottom, 1, 2 1/2, and then our 5/8 is between the 1/2 and the 3/4. And then this one, we need to have our diagonal going this direction. So we'll just line it up here. And on the opposite side, we're going to come up 1, 2 1/2, and then mark between the 1/2 and the 3/4, and that will be 2 5/8. And then we can go ahead and trim those, going from the upper corner to our mark. Sometimes it takes a second to line those up. I'm going to just stick that over there so I don't lose track of my pieces. And now we're going to go from this upper corner to our mark down here. Like that. And we can move our little trimmer out of the way. And so there we go. We've got our little pieces. I'm going to go ahead and erase the marks on my base card and on my pattern paper. And then I've got a mark over here. All the little pencil marks, right? We can get rid of those. We don't need those anymore. The one at the top. There we go. And now we can go ahead and put our pieces on. So again, we want to focus on the bottom and sides rather than the angled top on these angled pieces. So we're going to line equal distance bottom and sides, and then add our little triangle on top, like so. And you could ink the edges on these, you could sand the edges, you could use cardstock for these, anything you want. You could even take cardstock and do some random stamping with some of the pretty stamps in this collection. So many different choices that you could do. But we're keeping it simple today. We're just going with the pattern paper. And I love that they all work together so beautifully. Who is loving this Cape Cod collection? I think it's a nice, elegant, grown-up beach type collection. Sometimes our beachy things are a little bit more like for kids. So it's nice to have one that is for grown-ups. Okay, while we've got our interior happening here, let's add something in the corners. And so for that, I decided to go with the stripe and just cut it out separately so that my stripes match. And I've cut it in the same line so that the pattern goes from side to side. And these have been cut to 2.5 inch square. So 2.5 by 2.5. Let's go ahead and stick those down. Squares are a little bit easier to glue down with adhesive tape, so we're going to go ahead and use that. And pop that in the corner, like that. And then up here, another 2.5 inch square. There we go. Up in the corner. You gotta move it over a little bit. I'm trying to line it up. Trying to make it match a little bit. So there we go. And of course, we're gonna need a spot in our card for doing our writing. And this card gives you a gorgeous, like 5 by 5 space to write a nice big message. Now we are going to do some stamping in there. And the stamp that I want to stamp in there is Soaking Up the Sun from the stamp set. Where did I put it? Over here under my trimmer. So we've got the Soaking Up the Sun. So I'm going to stamp that while we've got it open. I'm going to remove that carefully from the carrier sheet. Pick it up with my stamp block. And I want to stamp that with some Lagoon ink, which is nice and gorgeous and matches the pattern paper. So we've got our Lagoon ink. Ink it up, Soaking Up the Sun. And I'm just going to kind of center it here. Now, of course, I'm working. Let me grab the foam. I'm working on my table that doesn't always stamp well. So I'm actually going to move it down. Let me see how far I can go down and still be in the camera. And see if we can get a good stamped image here. My table's not the best for stamping on because it's got a bend in it. There we go, Soaking Up the Sun. Looks lovely. And we'll give that a little quick wash. A little scrub. Put our ink away. And now we can move back to the outside. So again, just grab those top corners, give them a little squash, and now we're back out to the front. And we want to do some embellishing up here. So I've got a couple pieces of white daisy cardstock that I have cut to 2.5 inch square. And we're going to do some stamping on those. So let me bring my foam back. I'm going to move my card base. There we go. And I want to first get my Bluebird ink. I'm going to scooch this over a little bit. And I want to stamp Swimming in the Sea. That's another one of the stamps from this Cape Cod Scrapbooking Stamp set. So Swimming in the Sea. And I'll just scooch that one out of the way. Let's see if we can get that on there. Give it a little love. There we go, Swimming in the Sea. Give that a wipe off. Squeak. Look at me washing stamps. And then I also want to stamp the Playing in the Sand sentiment. Let me grab my stamp block. I want the Playing in the Sand. And when you're taking your stamps off your carrier sheet, you want to take them off carefully and just kind of walk your fingers along them so that you don't yank them off. Yanking is never good. When you're training a dog, you never want them to yank. It's the same with stamps. No yanking. And so for this, we're going to use the Toffee because we're talking about playing in the sand. For Swimming in the Sea, we chose blue. And for Playing in the Sand, we're going to use Toffee because that's a nice sandy color. So we're just going to go ahead and ink that up. Playing in the Sand. Like so. And this one, I'm going to kind of shift it down towards the bottom because we're going to add a little extra something on this one. So we're going to stamp this down lower like that. So it's a little bit towards the bottom. There we go. I'm not going to get rid of that just yet because I'm going to use it again, but I'm going to give this a little wipe off. And then from the stamp set, I also have the thin cuts. Let me just grab them here. So I have the thin cuts for the little banner and the coral, the crab, and the seahorse in here. And so I've gone ahead and cut a little banner using white daisy cardstock. If I could grab it, there we go. And so I want to stamp the little part that says, "You can find me." And we'll stamp that in Toffee as well, because it's going to go on the same square as our Playing in the Sand. Get that inked up well. And then see if we can't line it up here on our little banner. You can find me. Where can you find me? Playing in the sand. Swimming in the sea. All the places. So there we go. And what I want to do with this is I'm actually going to pop it up with some foam tape. Let me grab my foam tape, some 3D foam tape. Just put a couple little dabs on here. One on each end, one in the middle. Lovely. But before I do that, I want to add a little bit of edge inking, and I'm going to use the Bluebird for that, and I'm going to use our little round sponges. And you can wash these sponges, but you can tell that I use all the edges available before I wash it, and so I'm just using one of these edges. And to make it a little nicer, I'm just going to kind of curl it around so it looks a little bit like a curly foam, because normally you would use this outside edge, but you don't have to. Just because you normally do doesn't mean you have to. Hey, Marilyn! And so we're going to just ink all the way around this with a little bit of Bluebird ink, just like that. And I find that the sponge gives a little bit softer look than, say, the mini ink blending tool. And you can also ink the edges just by running the ink pad on them, but I think this kind of gives it a little bit kind of a watery look, just a little bit edge distressed and inky goodness. And we'll do that to both of them. Just like a little bit of water has been sloshing over the edges. Especially this swimming in the sea one. I've been swimming in the sea. There we go. Close that up. And let's bring these two together here. We're going to go ahead and add our little banner on. The "You Can Find Me." Now, you may find when you first stamp with Toffee that your Toffee looks a little weird. And as it sits, you can even see this one has sat a little longer. And it's gotten a little more sandy colored. And this one has a bit of a green tinge to it. And that is the kind of how the chemical makeup of that color works. When you first stamp it, you're like, oh my gosh, that's kind of greenish brown. That's not the color I wanted. But as it absorbs into the paper, the colors settle out how they're supposed to be, and it goes more brown. So now I've got a couple pieces of Lagoon paper that I'm going to use to just mat these two. And this Lagoon paper has been cut at 2 5/8 square. So that's halfway between 2 1/2 and 2 3/4. So 2 5/8. And so it's just going to leave a little Lagoon edge all the way around just to make them stand out a little bit. And it looks so pretty. There we go. Go ahead and stick that one on. And line it up here on my Lagoon. And that kind of picks up the color from those palm fronds that we've got going on in the pattern here. This lovely palmy leafy pattern has some Lagoon in there. So we're going to attach those here onto these upper flaps, just like that. So let's go ahead with this first one. You can find me playing in the sand. This would be, if you're thinking about other uses for this style of card, this would be a cute card. We were talking about nativity cards today. And this would actually be a cute card to do a nativity because it kind of looks like a little roof on your gatefold card when it stands up. So you could have your little nativity scene in there. That would be super cute. You can make it into, thinking about Christmas again, a little gingerbread house, because Samantha was making a gingerbread inspired thing today. You could, you know, you could put farm animals inside of it. So many different things. And of course, you can do it just as a fun thing, because obviously playing in the sand and swimming in the sea, you're not worrying about whether you got a roof, because you're enjoying the great outdoors. And then let's add a couple more decorations. So I've die cut out one of the little corals and one of the little seahorses because I'm obsessed with them and they're so cute. And so let's stamp those up. I'm going to do my coral in the Bluebird again, just to carry that color down. So I've got my Bluebird ink. Oh, I haven't got the coral stamp out. There we go. And I'll use this one. Just load it up on my block. Ink it up. Now, normally I'm the kind of person who likes to stamp first and die cut second, but to save ourselves some time, I die cut first. And then you gotta hold your breath and make sure that you stamp it in the right spot. But with clear stamps and clear blocks, it's usually not too difficult. So there's our little coral. I don't know if there's bright blue coral in the sea, but that's okay. We can go a little off-roading. And then I've got the little seahorse here too. And we're going to stamp him in Lagoon. And I don't know why, but that seems to be the color I always like to go to for this little seahorse. And it's going to match with what's happening on the front of our cards. So we might as well just go with it. So let's see if we can't line him up as well. And shuffling him a little closer to me, because he's got a few more little bits to try and line up than the coral. I think I did okay. And I love how these new stamps are creating those dark lines and the shaded areas. Isn't that so fun on these stamped images, that you get all those different tones of the ink coming through? I think that's super, super cool. So let's add these on here. Let's use some foam tape for that, because why not? Turn them over. Add some 3D foam tape. Just a few little snippety snips. There's no fussy cutting on this one. I don't know what the world is coming to when there's no fussy cutting on a card. So we have to use our scissors somehow. So we'll use them for the foam tape. And then let's add a little coral, maybe on the left side here. Oh, if I can get the backing off. There we go. And the last one. And so when we squash this down, we can kind of have an idea of where to put this. I'm just going to go ahead and center mine. And then we've got our little seahorse. Now this seahorse is a little bit tall for the space, but I have seen videos of seahorses, and I've seen them actually, I think at the Toronto Zoo we saw seahorses, and they don't always stay exactly upright. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tip my little seahorse a little bit, and he looks like he's running towards the coral, or swimming towards the coral. And let's add a little bit of a bling bling on here. I've got my blue dots. And the center, I got them upside down. The center color, we've got, I believe, sapphire here. And these ones in the center are the Bluebird. And then I think this is periwinkle over here, which is also a coordinating color. But I'm going to go for these Bluebird ones, because that'll match our nice little inking up there. And let's add a little star down there, because it kind of looks like a little starfish. And then maybe we'll add a couple little guys up here beside our seahorse, and that is our completed card. I hope it's completed. I think I did everything. So we've got our base created out of that white daisy cardstock. We've got our stamping on the front in the Toffee and the Bluebird and the Lagoon. You can find me playing in the sand, swimming in the sea, and then when we open it up, soaking up the sun. And you could even do this as a cute little insert into a mini album. You could attach this into your mini album and then have this part open up. You can add lots of photos in here. You have little photos. You can have journaling spots, little decorations, and a large photo in the center. So many uses for this double squash card. Thank you, Marilyn, for sharing this afternoon and giving everybody the idea that we should go ahead and make that. And so I hope you guys enjoyed seeing that come together with those beautiful patterns from the Cape Cod collection, as well as the beautiful Toffee mix-in paper as well. And if you feel inspired to make one of these cards, take a picture of it and pop it in the comments when I post the photos, because I would love to see it. All right, have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you again soon. Toodaloo, bye.